Hoshana Raba, the Siyum Hadin. The Zohar says that Hoshana Raba is the Siyum of the Din. We have the Yemei Hadin, the Yom Neroim, Rosh Hashanah, the Ksiva, Asher Yismei Tshuva, Yom Kippur, the Chasima, and Hoshana Raba is the Siyum Hadin. What is the Siyum Hadin? If there is a Chasima, if the Din is sealed on Yom Kippur, so Ne'ilah is Ne'ilas Sha'orim, the closing of the gates, that's the Chasima. So then it's sealed. What is the meaning of the Siyum Hadin? That Hoshana Raba is the Siyum Hadin. As we know, as the Zohar says, that the Psachim, the Piska Tova, we have the written documents that are sent out, the messengers are sent out to deliver the proclamation of the Din. What is the meaning of this? Furthermore, it would be more understandable if the days from Yom Kippur to Hoshana Raba were days of, for instance, similar to Aseres Yemei Tshuva, where there are days of Tefillah and Slichas and Rachamim and Tanis and V'chula, so that we'd be engaged in Tshuva similar to Aseres Yemei Tshuva. That would be more understandable, that there would be the Siyum Hadin and Hoshana Raba. But the days after Yom Kippur, the days of Sukkot are the days of great Simcha and Mishta. So how is that appropriate for Hoshana Raba, that it's suddenly at the end of Sukkot and the Yemei Simcha and Mishta, there's suddenly a Yom Hadin, a type of Yom Hadin. And why is this Siyum specifically on the seventh day, Hoshana Raba, the seventh day of Sukkot? Perhaps we can understand this in the following manner. We know that Chazal tell us, the Mishnah and Yuma, that on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol would do the Avodah, Lifnai of Lifnim, the Big Day Lovan, and after he completed his Avodah on Yom Kippur, Lifnai of Lifnim, Big Day Lovan, he would have a tefillah. He would say a tefillah after Yotza Kohen Gadol B'Sholem, when he went out safely in peace from the Kodesh HaKadoshim, he would recite a tefillah. And one of the tefillahs that he recited was that the tefillah of the travelers that are traveling on the roads, their tefillah should not come before you, Ribbono Shel Olam. What was their tefillah? Their tefillah is that it shouldn't rain. They're traveling. They're going home. They're traveling on the roads. Now, the Kohen Gadol and Klal Yisrael are being mispalel for a year of rains, plentiful rains, abundant crops, so that the tefillah of the Ivri Drachim should not come before you, Ribbono Shel Olam, because their tefillah will be to stop the rains. So those tefillahs should not be accepted. And the question arises, Gans Klal Yisrael is being mispalel for Geshamim, for rain. The Kohen Gadol, Yom Kippur, Lifnai Lifnim, and they have to worry about some wayward traveler traveling on the road that he does not want the rains. Why is there special tefillah to counteract the tefillah of the Ivri Drachim? Here you have Gans Klal Yisrael, and the Kohen Gadol, and the Beis HaMikdash, and the Avodah Lifnai Lifnim, and there has to be a special tefillah to counteract the Ivri Drachim. Sagt Rav Chatzkel Levenstein, in the name of the altar in Kelm, that the tefillah of the Ivri Drachim is all alone. He's all alone, and he knows that he is totally in the hands of the Ribbono Shel Olam, that no one can help him, no one can save him. It's only the Ribbono Shel Olam that can help him and that can get him safely home. His tefillah, which comes me'umka deliba, and knowing that he's totally dependent on the Ribbono Shel Olam, nothing else and no one else. He's all alone. He's there traveling on the roads, and if there'll be a torrential rain, he won't be able to get safely home. He's totally dependent on the Ribbono Shel Olam. When someone feels and acknowledges me'umka deliba that he is totally dependent on the Ribbono Shel Olam, his tefillos penetrate the shamayim. They have an unbelievable koyach. So the Kohen Gadol had to be mispalel that those tefillas should not reach the Rebbeinu Shalom because the welfare of Klal Yisrael was at stake. And it's dafka the Kohen Gadol, when he's Yotze B'Sholem, after he left the Kodesh Kadoshim B'Sholem, meaning, as we know from the Gemara in Yuma, that there were many Kahanim Gedolim who had ulterior motives and did not leave the Kodesh Kadoshim B'Sholem. But the Kohen Gadol who did, his motives were pure, his avodah was pure. It was on the Yom Kodesh V'Torah, Yom Kippur. He was doing the avodah b'Big Day Lovan and the Kodesh Kadoshim. His tefillas at that point, at that juncture, had the ability to block the tefillah of the Ivri Derachim. We see this yesod, that someone who is totally dependent on the Rebbeinu Shalom and cries out me'umka talib and acknowledges that he's totally dependent, that he's in the hands of the Kadosh Baruch Hu and only HaKadosh Baruch Hu, those tefillahs are very, very precious. And we see this by Chana. We know we learn out many of the halachos of tefillah, of davening, Shemona Esrei. The Gemara in Brachos learns out from Chana. V'hi medaberas al libo, that Shemona Esrei is, we daven it, we move our lips, but the voice is not heard. Different halachos of tefillah that we learn out from Chana. When did Chana cry out to Hashem? And when were tefillahs answered? The Pasuk says that her husband Elkanah says, "Why are you so distraught? Why are you so upset? I'm better to you than 10 children. Why are you so upset that you don't have a son? Why are you so upset you don't have children? I'm better than 10 children." It's like the Malbim. It was specifically at that juncture that Chana cried out, her tefillahs were answered. Because up until that point, she was dependent on her husband. Her husband was a tzaddik, was a godel ador. She was dependent on the schus and on the tefillahs of her husband Elkanah. But at that point, where Elkanah seemed to say to her that there's no point anymore, I'm better than 10 children, meaning that don't be upset. And so if you don't have children, even if you don't, so you don't have children, I'm better than 10 children. So then she felt that she could not rely on Elkanah anymore. Then she felt that the only one she could rely on is the Rebbeinu Shalom. Called out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu me'umka daliba v'chana medaberes el liba. From her heart, from the depths of her heart, she cried out to Hashem. She was dependent only on the Rebbeinu Shalom. She called out from the depths of her heart, me'umka daliba, and her tefillahs were answered. And that's when we have a special koyach ha-tefillah. When we acknowledge the Hashkafa protis, that the Rebbeinu Shalom looks after us, He takes care of us. We acknowledge the Hashkafa protis, and that we're dependent on the Rebbeinu Shalom and only on the Rebbeinu Shalom. Then our tefillahs have a special koyach. That's the koyach, the tefillah of Chana and the Ivri Derachim. Sukkot is a time of Hashkafa protis. We leave our houses. We live in a diras arai, a temporary dwelling. We are living and dwelling in the Tzilta de Memenusa, under the shade of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Tachas, the tzeil of the Rebbeinu Shalom. We're living dependent. It's a time where it's mesugal, especially appropriate to be mashrish in our neshamas the hashkacha protis, to acknowledge that it's hashkacha protis, that it's Rebbeinu Shalom who takes care of us. It's not our big edifices, our houses, our fortresses, not our wealth, not our connections. It's the Rebbeinu Shalom. Sukkot is mesugal to be mashrish that in our minds and our hearts. The hashkacha protis. It's the Rebbeinu Shalom, only the Rebbeinu Shalom that takes care of us. So after we spend the 7 days of Sukkot, the avodah of Sukkot, it's a different type of avodah than a serious Yemei Tshuva. The time after Yom Kippur to Hoshana Raba is a time where it's not fasting, it's not slichas, but it is that acknowledgement that the Ribbono Shel Olam is the one, and only the Ribbono Shel Olam takes care of the Hashkafa Pratis. We're living in the tale of the Sukkah, the tale of Hashkafa Pratis. At that time, especially Mesugal, especially appropriate that we can daven to Hashem. We can daven to Hashem umka deliba, from the depths of our heart, and that has a power to block the pischa, to block the proclamation. And if there are rains that are harmful, it can block, it can hasten it as well. And any kind of bracha, those tefillahs can hasten the brachas. Yes, they ksivs Rosh Hoshana, Chasima, and Yom Kippur, but the carrying out of the verdict, whether it's blocking it or whether it's speeding it up, whether it's blocking harmful ones, speeding up brachas, that's still in our hands until Hoshana Raba, where we demonstrate and acknowledge our total belief in Hashkafa Pratis and our dependency on the Ribbono Shel Olam. And if we cry out B'kedusha v'tahar me'umka deliba, we have that power on Hoshana Raba. And that's why specifically on Hoshana Raba, the kayach of the tefillah of the Oivri Drochim, the tefillah of Chana, to block or hasten the pischa, and should be a pischa tova for all of us. Years ago, I was at a Siyum for Bachrim from Achenu, the Kirov organization. That was Makarev. It's Makarev. Children brings them in, and children in Bachrim, and girls, it brings them into Yiddishkeit and Torah and Yiddishkeit. It makes from boys from backgrounds that are not Torah Dika backgrounds, tries to make them into genuine B'nai Torah. I was once at a Siyum, and the Messiah of the Masechta was a Bachar from a very, very weak Torah Dika background, traditional background, but very, very weak in Torah and Mitzvahs. And to that Siyum, parents were invited as well. And during the course of the Siyum and the drashas, this Messiah's father was looking at me and staring at me. I was trying to feel a little uncomfortable, but I sensed that there was something that he was burning to tell me, that he just had to tell me and get off his chest. After the Siyum, so I went over to him and I gave him mazel tov on his son's accomplishment, and he says, I have to tell you something. He said, we're from a very poor background, we're a very poor family. And I worked hard my whole life. But I got into an accident, and I hurt my back. And I can't work anymore. And I have to spend most of the day lying down. And I'm in great pain. And we have great poverty. My wife works from morning to night to sustain the family. All I have in this world is the nachas from my son. That's all I have in life. But that's worth more to me than all of the treasures. A tefillah Oivri Drochim, a tefillah of Chana. He has nothing. He's in pain and poverty. But what he wants is that his son should be a Talmid Chacham. And coming from this background, which is completely not a Torah Dika background, his tefillahs were answered and his son became a Talmid Chacham. We should all be Zoichem